Welcome back to Beyond the Wrench. My name is Jay Goninen, and I am your host. Before we get started with this week's episode, we want to ask our listeners for a quick favor. If you love listening to Beyond the Wrench and have a friend, family member, or coworker that you think would also love Beyond the Wrench, please share the podcast with them. Doing this helps us achieve our mission of promoting and improving technician careers, and we couldn't do that without the help of our amazing listeners. We will provide a link to share our podcast in the show notes below. For today's episode, I have with me Tim Eisenmann, who is the CEO of Torqata. Tim, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, Jay. Good job on pronouncing my name as well as our company. We hit it off on the right foot.
Yeah, it's the blind squirrel can find a nut every once in a while, so I got it. That's good. Well, we appreciate you joining us today. I think with what you're doing for the industry and in general, I mean, some of the stuff with Torqata and like everything that you're doing just blows my mind. So I'm really excited to kind of dive into what all that means and really learn more about it in general. But I want to start with you first. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Yeah. Well, Tim Eisenmann. I have been working not necessarily in the automotive industry, but around kind of travel and logistics. Basically, for my entire career, I'm from Germany originally, and then worked for Lufthansa, the German airline, for a couple of years, which was exciting. Yet also, it's a big German company, and I was also happy to get out of it. I came to the States for grad school, and then, any good business school student that doesn't know what he or she wants to do, decided to give consulting a shot, and did that for 3-4 years, and stayed kind of within the logistics and transportation realm, I would say. And what I realized was that most of the traditional consulting engagements started to get more and more data heavy. And, so data heavy that the average kind of Excel analyst wasn't able to do the work anymore. And so at that moment, I started to marry my interest in logistics and transportation, basically anything that moves, to facilitate all those moves, with data science and analytics. And that's what then brought me to American Tires, who I joined in 2017 as their first ever chief analytics officer. And then that morphed into my career at Torqata now, which I've been founding and running for the last 2 years. We're trying to bring data science to the aftermarket.
It's a fascinating story. I do have to ask, what was there any difference in growing up in Germany? Like, I'm so fascinated by other cultures, and you got to talk to me a little bit about growing up in Germany.
Well, I've only grown up in Germany, so I don't know how different it would be in the US. But, I grew up in a relatively urban environment. Frankfurt, Germany, I would say very diverse. A lot of internationals. Frankfurt's kind of the banking capital of Europe. So I always really enjoyed that. And I think that just, got me excited about other cultures and with all my classmates and friends from soccer and whatnot, we're from different parts of the world. So I think that interest in just travel and people and other cultures, was woken up relatively early. But I'd also say that, I've always been excited about living in other places. And so that's, I think, what kind of drove me towards Lufthansa, the airline, and my first job out of college. Always loved exploring the world, and I've been really fortunate to live in a bunch of places in the United States as well. I now work, in the logistics industry, in the auto aftermarket, which kind of is a bit of a red thread. But I had a great time back in Germany. I love going back. COVID's been tricky, to see my folks. But I try to be there every 2 or 3 years. I got to tell you though, what's funny. I'm very involved in the aftermarket here in the tire industry, and I've started to notice that it's been more and more difficult to talk to my friends from school, my family about what I do, because I don't know a lot of the German words for the stuff that we do. So I think I'm making my transition to be an honorary American and have more and more of a hard time to connect with the folks back home, at least on the career side.
Has your English always been this polished?
No. I mean, in Europe, we like to learn foreign languages. We kind of have to.
Right.
There's only 30 million people that speak German, and so you can't really work in a lot of places with just that knowledge. So think I started having my first kind of English classes in school in probably like second or third grade. So you get started early, and then I picked up a little bit of French and a little bit of Spanish. But yeah, English has always been I've always been fascinated by the U.S. Movies and media and just music, and so that was always my thing. I remember I think I ratcheted my English, picking up English and reading and consuming media up when like the Harry Potter books were coming around 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 15 years ago probably, because they would come out in English before they'd come out in German. And so I wanted to read them right when they came out. So I remember having my little Harry Potter dictionary next to me, like what's a broomstick and what's a cauldron. And so I just built on top of that.
I was going to say, I think other countries probably do that far better than we do for foreign language. I think in my experience, and now that's been 20 plus years ago, but going through high school, they're like, oh yeah, by the way, you have to take 2 years of Spanish or something like that. Yeah. And so while I took, I believe 3 years of Spanish, I don't know anything about Spanish. And if I were to be put in a country that speaks Spanish, I think I would be completely lost. Like there's no way I would be able to I guess hang with.
But that's the only way you'll learn, right?
Yeah.
You gotta be thrown in on the deep end and try to swim, and sure you'd pick it up in a couple of months. But English is so prevalent across Europe, and as I said, like music we listen to and just the movies and everything, and it's relatively easy. Actually, the Europeans that are the best English speakers are the ones of like smaller countries, like Scandinavia, the Netherlands, because they don't dub the movies; they just add subtitles. So they used to English, like at the movie theater in front of their TV all the time. Germany is large enough, so we get dubbed versions of the movies. So that's why people with a German accent have a usually relatively heavy accent, and people from Scandinavia sound like they're American.
That is, I honestly did not know that. I definitely learned something already. How did you decide on coming to the U.S. and then like being able to pick out your grad school? Was that always going to happen? Was it always going to be in America that you were going to go to grad school?
Probably. I was actually, the first time I came to the U.S. for a longer period of time was when I was 15. I did like a high school year abroad in the U.S. and spent 10 months in Wichita, Kansas, middle of...
Wow.
Yeah. So I did that. I was a senior or junior in high school back then, and stayed for 10 months, and just I really enjoyed myself. And, in Germany, education is free. So it was a kind of a hard decision to move to the U.S. and spend a crap ton of money on grad school. But, I always thought I would love working here. And the only way to honestly do that is to get a degree here, because you get a green card, or not a green card, but like, a work visa for 2 years after. So it's a little easier to do that. And, put that together with, me wanting to definitely get a graduate degree, and the U.S. seemed like the natural choice. I had a couple of people around me as well that had done business school in the U.S. and had really positive experience, especially, coming to the country without the network. It was important to me to be, for a year or two around folks that, would become my friends and would help me jumpstart my career a little bit.
That's super impressive and super intimidating at such a young age to, make that leap. And even you mentioned we probably, with everything that happened with COVID, to be able to connect with your family and be so far away from them, I give you a lot of credit for that. That's not the easiest thing in the world to do.
COVID was special, right? I think there's a lot of examples of people that lived across the country, weren't able to see their folks. So I guess I'm not alone on that one, or in that one. And now, with just FaceTime and all that stuff so readily available, we're used to it. My family is. And I would say, when we do get together, either in Germany or my folks visiting me here, it's actually nice to be able to spend, a week or 2 or 3 with each other. It's much more intense. When I lived with or closer to my parents and my family, I don't think I valued the time together as much, I almost saw it as a chore. It's like, sure, I'll come over on Sunday for dinner. And now it's really nice, and we try to make it special and create memories. So there's a the positive side in all of this.
What German perception of the Autobahn? Is it as big of a deal? I've never been there. It's a bucket list thing for me.
Not as big of a deal. No, I got to say, like German beer tradition and the Autobahn is hyped up here. Not as much talked about as it is in Germany. You think, oh my gosh, the Autobahn's like 5 lanes and you go as fast as you can. But we got the same issues as we do here. I mean, there's construction and there's traffic, and so 3 a.m. in like a remote part of Germany, you could probably go pretty fast, but most of the time, no.
No, all right. Well, that crushed my dreams right there. That's okay though.
There was a good segue though, Jay, from Germany. You're like, and we're going to move to cars and automotive. Well done.
It works well, right? That's an easy transition. So, talk to me about starting this business. With WrenchWay, I know a lot of the ups and downs that go with starting a business, but your background is so different than mine, and your company is. In that, like, as I talk to you, I'm like, oh my goodness, you're just on a whole different level. Like, everything you're doing is crazy. So how did this come about? Like the actual decision to like, hey, I'm going to do this thing.
Yeah, it's a great story. It actually starts before we founded the company. I was a consultant, and my boss was like, Tim, if you want to make partner, you got to take on a couple more logistics clients. And I was like, love to work for airlines and hotel companies, like a little it's a little sexier. And they're like, yeah, there's this like random tire distribution logistics company out in North Carolina. We don't really know, but they need a little bit of help. And that was American Tire Distributors, like one of the big gorillas in the aftermarket that I'd never heard of. I tried Googling them, and instead of ATD, I got to like ADP and payroll and all that stuff. But they were at an interesting time, I would say, in its history. ATD is a roll-up of many regional distributors and then established a national footprint. Kind of in the late 2010s, I would say. And they changed out the leadership team from a bunch of deal makers. They're really good at buying companies and integrating them, and brought in some more folks that knew how to run a large distribution business and not just gobble up smaller ones. So the leadership team kind of changed, and they started formulating a hypothesis that a lot of the internal processes that existed within American Tires would benefit from just a little more science. And a lot of companies in the aftermarket that have grown throughout, legacy companies that are big, a lot of expertise, a lot of folks that have made their career in those places, probably aren't as progressive as maybe companies in other industries. And so I joined ATD first as a consultant and then full time with the intent of building an internal analytics team, an advanced analytics team, not backward looking at reporting. We had all of that. But becoming more predictive, bringing buzzwords, but actually, buzzwords that make a difference into the company.
Are relevant, yeah.
Artificial intelligence, machine learning, say that 4 times and your enterprise value, triples. Maybe that was a side benefit. But so we built a small team within American Tires and started figuring out that maybe not every customer needs to be visited every 3 months. Maybe there's some customers that, they're really happy with ATD. We don't have to talk to them that much, or they don't like to be talked to. There's others where we got to intervene a little more. So how can we predict which customers are going to churn? That was actually our first kind of big project. And over the first 2 years, kind of built an internal analytics muscle. Brought on some new talent, which was exciting. ATD's first data scientists, and so we had a fun ride there. But then, in late 2019, early 2020, we realized a couple of things. The first one, I would say, was that some of the solutions we had built within ATD, right, actually had applications for ATD's customers too. Like, think about an ATD warehouse, right? What sort of tires do I stock in that warehouse? Well, you stock based on the demand you see in the market, right? And when a big retailer for tires thinks about what they stock in their store, well, they think about, what does the demand look like with the people and vehicles around me? So the approach is kind of similar, stocking an ATD warehouse and stocking a much smaller tire retailers. And the same thing holds true in manufacturing. How many tires does ATD have to buy? How many tires does Michelin have to make? So we thought maybe some of the solutions we had developed would have application left and right. The other insight that we had, and the more profound one, was that a lot of the problems that ATD was trying to solve at the time, and others were trying to solve as well, were not necessarily homegrown problems that could be solved with just throwing more compute power and like smart analytics PhDs at the problem. They were given the dynamics of the industry. So think about inventory, right? One of the biggest cost items on ATD's balance sheet and on the balance sheet of a lot of aftermarket companies, given the changing car park and SKU and size proliferation, right? So you have to keep a lot of stuff in stock. Well, in our industry, in the tire space, fill rates in the aftermarket aren't all that great. Somewhere between 50 to 70% before COVID, lower probably during COVID, and
very, very much so.
So what happens if you order 100 tires from manufacturer A, but you only get 60? Well, you probably order 150 tires, hoping that you get 100. You probably also keep some buffer inventory, accounting for any supply shortages. And all of these things are bad because buffer inventory costs money. Passing on a bad demand signal to Michelin and Conti is not good because then Michelin and Conti have no idea whether they need to make 150 tires or 100 tires because everyone kind of plays that game. And ultimately, it's poor customer experience because retailers might not get what they actually need. And so we're like, So maybe the approach needs to be to provide Michelin a better demand signal so that they can increase their fill rates, so that ATD can lower its buffer inventory. So now we got three constituents that need to collaborate differently to ultimately help each of the parts of the supply chain be more efficient. And that was the moment when we thought, well, maybe this analytics muscle we built within the organization should actually be a standalone company with the goal of helping automotive aftermarket retailers, distributors, and manufacturers collaborate and make better data-driven decisions. And that was 2 years ago. And that's Torqata today.
That is insane. And I think the benefits behind that being higher customer satisfaction rate while carrying less inventory, essentially, right? If you can accurately predict what is going to happen, you don't have to have those warehouses full of tires or at least the wrong kind of tires, which, I mean, from an inventory standpoint, and anybody that's been in the parts world, you live by your inventory turns, and seeing that is like, oh my goodness, that's from an analytics perspective, that's crazy how deep you've gone into this.
Well, and we talked about inventory, but a lot of other core processes are related to basically knowing how much you need to either produce or carry, or where do the warehouses need to be? How many stores do I have to have? How much carrying capacity do I have to have, right? What do I need to produce? How much rubber do I need to buy in order to make a set of tires? How many plantations, rubber plantations, do I need to partner with? How many trucks do I need? How many warehouse workers? Like, all of that stuff is connected to having a better view of the future. And if I don't have that, I make too much of the wrong stuff and I put it in the wrong place. What happens? I need to move it around, which costs you money. It's also really bad for the environment, like moving stuff from warehouse A to warehouse B because you didn't plan well. Or you gotta take a price action, do a marketing push, offload some of your inventory, eats into your margin, and all of that costs money. We actually at the beginning of this were like, well, we shouldn't try to solve a problem that's not that big. So we tried to estimate how big that problem is. In the tire space alone, I'll let you guess. How much money do you think the replacement tire industry, retailers, distributors, manufacturers, right, is wasting every year due to suboptimal decision making?
That is a loaded question, but I would guess it's in the billions.
It is in the billions. It's between $1.5 to $2 billion that retailers, distributors, manufacturers are leaving on the table every year because of higher than needed inventory levels, fire sales because they made the wrong stuff, unnecessary product moves, stock outs. It's a big number. And that's tires alone.
And just making decisions on bad data. I mean, that alone could cost a ton of money.
Oh, yeah. And you look left and right. Other industries have companies like Torqata and have had companies like Torqata for a really long time, right? Like Nielsen, IRI, define how business is being done in a lot of other industries, like CPG. Pepsi knows how much Coke sold in a specific market and has known that for like 30, 40 years and is making a bunch of decisions based on that knowledge. So the aftermarket, and we can talk about that, is special. And there is no IRI or Nielsen for the aftermarket yet.
You say yet?
Well, yeah, we're trying to be that. But it's tricky, right? It's a very tricky environment because you're not dealing with 2, 3, 4 big players, right? In CPG, like everything is owned by Unilever. Like any soda you can buy is made by Coke or Pepsi. So it's a little more straightforward. In our space, especially on the retail side, the market is super fragmented, right? There's like hundreds of thousands of places where you can get your tire changed or your car fixed, and a lot of these places are, single operators, family-owned businesses. Those are not companies that have like a very robust IT infrastructure, data infrastructure, and if you have that at retail, it just makes it very difficult to create a data asset that can then be shared upstream in the form of a forecast or a benchmark or anything like that. Other industries that don't have that fragmentation, I think, have it a little easier in that regard.
One thing that sticks out to me as unique as you're describing this is the relationship between the distributor and the manufacturer.
Yeah.
I think when I'm listening to you, what I think is so impressive is that you were able to get maybe somebody like a Michelin to open the door to be open to that conversation. Whereas, I think traditionally, maybe that tire manufacturer wouldn't have been so open or thinking that they should be driving the car, right? Like they should be the one in charge.
It is a constant struggle, I would say. And not only on the manufacturer side. I think it's retail distribution to manufacturing. I mean, there's a lot of mistrust still in the industry, right? Of course, there's your direct competitors, but your distribution is kind of your channel into the market. Are they friends? Are they foes? Are you want to put all eggs in one basket? There's a lot of consolidation. The industry is relatively small as well. So none of these ingredients, make for a lot of trust and collaboration and partnership. So that's definitely something to overcome. But I've been starting to see the light bulbs go on because,
yes.
Torqata came out of ATD, but we always said for Torqata to realize its full potential, it needed to be operating fully separate from ATD. Because how can I go to a retailer and say, hey, I'm going to provide analytics services for you. I'm going to help you optimize your stocking strategy. You got to share some data with me to do that, so I can do that. How can we prevent the ATD salesperson to then knock on that retailer's door and say, hey, I saw you sold 100 tires last month, but I only sold you 30. Where'd you get the other 70 from? What's going on, right? Once the retailer feels like Torqata is a Trojan horse to develop a competitive advantage for ATD, we lost all trust. And so it was clear from the get-go that this could not be a business unit within American Tires, but needed to be for now, wholly owned subsidiary. But, looking ahead, a couple of years, like I do think that, and we've seen this in other industries, that an asset like Torqata should be owned by multiple kind of strategic players in the space as well, to truly play into this idea of it being kind of an objective, third party, rather than an entity that's too much attached to one of those other players.
It's an interesting thing that we see in the industry as well, right? Like we deal with labor and technicians, and we make that really clear, but it's also really hard because I'm sure there's people out there that have been burned by that in the past. And like for us, that was one of the important pieces is, we've constantly said, hey, we're Switzerland. We're not trying to be, we're like stealing information or taking information and using it in a negative way. We want to make the industry better. And,
yes.
And I think it's hard for people to wrap their hands around that piece, and that there are people that are doing it for the betterment of the industry as a whole. But I feel like there's a lot more companies out there that are doing that, and I think it's really cool.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, ultimately, like, we want to raise the tide for everyone, right?
Yes.
There's a bunch of costs that are unnecessary. We can take those out, and that's good for everyone. So I don't think in our case they necessarily need to be winners or losers. And ultimately, every entity is also responsible to use and execute upon the insights that we're generating for them. And that's where competitive advantage might lay just as well, right? Like, is your entity able to, like, augment the processes that you have based on new insights? And frankly, like, I'll bet on a company that's able to do that for the future, because that's, I think, the other piece as to why Torqata is so interesting to me is there's going to be so much more data that will be generated, be it vehicles, be it any IoT device, parts, RFID tags. We're relatively behind, and so I think we'll see the supply chain as well as our products become more digital, smart, trackable, which is going to just lead to a multifold increase in the data available. So I think us positioning ourselves as a player that's able to take that in and turn it into something that's relevant from a supply chain lens will set us up well for the future. I'm excited for IoT to really enter the industry.
It'll be cool.
This week's episode of Beyond the Wrench is brought to us by Zimbrick. The Zimbrick story began in 1965 when their founder, John Zimbrick, purchased a Buick franchise at the corner of Park and Regent Street in Madison, Wisconsin. John built his dealership around a philosophy he called loving care service, and the rest is history. Today, the Zimbrick family of dealerships has grown to 16 new car franchises. They have 20 service locations throughout Dane County, an additional store in Milwaukee, as well as 3 award-winning body shops. Zimbrick is behind every errand, every road trip, every commute, every holiday visit, and every emergency. Their customers rely on them for safe and reliable vehicles to get them there, and Zimbrick is always looking for talented individuals to help them in their mission. Winner of Best of Madison and Madison's People Choice Awards for 2022, Zimbrick is proud to serve its community. Visit the Zimbrick WrenchWay page at zimbrick.wrenchway.com to find out how you can join their team.
I want to talk about that data side a little bit more.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating to me is you're talking about these data scientists coming in and a lot of just advanced analytics. Where do you even start with something like that? Is it just kind of getting an idea of what is being currently tracked and then trying to improve upon that? Or where when you were doing all of this, how do you even start?
Well, so when we were doing our stuff within ATD, there's data available within ATD, so it's relatively straightforward, I'd say. The big lesson here is, for me at least, was to not boil the ocean, right? There's a ton of things you could do. If you're trying too many of them, you're highly likely to fail across all of them, right? So, like, pick 1 or 2 things. For us, it was a customer churn model. How can I predict which customers are going to stop doing business with American Tires? And if I can do that, I can tell the salespeople to go visit a certain customer, try to see what the root cause is, and then try to resolve it. Right? That was our first model. And so you're looking at data availability within the 4 walls of the company. You look at a problem that's worth solving, and most importantly, you're looking at executive sponsors, in our case, our head of sales, that kind of gets it and is willing to take a bit of a risk, right? Because technology and data is great, and I've built my career upon it, but we're not, ATD is not, very few companies in the aftermarket are, e-commerce companies. Well, I'll just change, the color of a button, and I'm going to get higher conversion rate, and no human has to ever be in the loop. Most of the decisions that, or insights that we're generating then have to lead to someone ordering more or less forfeits, right? Someone deciding to actually do pay a customer a visit. And so it's important to get the, let's say, human side right and the buy-in and the sponsorship so that the technology and the data that you're putting to work then doesn't end up in a dead end. And so I think that's been a key learning, just going where the energy is and where you've got people that are supportive from a change management standpoint.
When you look at your churn rate or a customer deflection.
Yeah.
Is there anything that stands out to you as like, hey, this number is this way, and so we should reach out to them?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, and data science is exciting, right? So I'm not going to go to technical here, but basically when you build a predictive model, in addition to getting the prediction, what you can also get from the model is to figure out what drove the prediction. So in the case of, a customer that might be churning, give it a score between 0 and 1. We say, everyone above 70 is probably a high-risk churner. But in addition, you can also pick up what part of the model drove that high score. So, and there were some interesting insights on that front. Like, for example, the amount of times that customers visit certain parts of like the B2B ordering portal, like the help center, or checking, the delivery times, was an indication as to whether customers were happy or not happy with ATD service, right? Without them actually calling the 1-800 number and complaining, there's indications that you can pick up before. Or we also noticed customers might have kept the same level of, like the same order volume, but they changed the SKU mix. So they ordered less SKUs, but they might have ordered the same amount. It was an indication they might be deflecting and going to another party. That differs, customer by customer. So in addition to just telling the sales organization, hey, go visit John's Tire Store, we would tell them, go visit John's Tire Store and talk to them about their delivery experience, because we think that's an issue. So you kind of give them a bit of an idea on what the root cause could be.
Wow. So that was kind of where I was headed with this too, is that, when you start to look at this and you start to look at the retailer side of this, and what you just said to me is so fascinating that it wasn't just, hey, go pay them a visit. It's, hey, go pay them a visit and talk about this very specific thing, because the analytics told you to go talk to them about that. That is incredible. That is so cool to me.
Yeah, we were able to reduce customer churn by, 20-30%. I mean, we're talking like tens of millions of dollars, but also just a much better customer experience, right? Like instead of having a guy show up and drop off a couple of leaflets and leave, now they show up and say, hey, I noticed, your SKU profile over the last couple of months has changed. Does that have something to do with, one of our competitors opening a new warehouse? Right? Like, all right, well, that's a good conversation to have, right?
Right.
In some cases, you even notice things that customers were not aware of. And I think, that's a sentiment that, I try to embody with Torqata now as well. Right? There's so many software companies that they're like trying to push data and whatnot, but like if you can't make it actionable, might as well not do it, because
yes,
look at the retailers we all do business with, right? They're really busy. They're really busy. There's a staff shortage. There's a lot of volatility in the market, and we just can't expect a retailer to have an extra 5 hours to get trained up on a tool, or an extra 3 hours to on the weekend sift through like tons of data, try to find like an interesting nugget. I mean, people are going to gravitate towards the problems they're most familiar with, which is like, do I have enough people to like open the shop tomorrow? Or do I have to turn the wrench by myself? So One thing that we're really trying to push is, for the retailers in particular, right? How can we turn the information that we have, make it bite-sized, and give it to retailers in a way in which they can consume it relatively easily? And so an example of that is our very first kind of pricing benchmarking tool. We were built by engineers. And I'm not an engineer, but I have like an engineer's mind. So I was like, well, we absolutely have to give the retailers like all the pricing information out there. And we got to make it as granular as possible, because I'm sure they want to dig in. Well, no, absolutely not. So today, instead of giving someone a big data table, we send them an email every week that says, hey, your 3 fast movers that you sell a bunch of, you're actually priced 15% below competition. If you move that up, there's an extra couple $100 you could have made in pure margin. Now, that's much more digestible and easier for the retailer to act on. And maybe they're not getting 100% of the benefit of always having the right pricing for all their items, but they're getting 80% and 20% of the time, right? They're much more likely to then adopt and come back the next time.
That is cool. And I could not agree more. I'm on the opposite end of that spectrum where I am more of probably marketing sales mentality. But I love dashboards and I love being able to see that data. I'm curious, do people then ask questions on that? Or like one of the things that I think I've been trained a certain way in terms of you take one of those dashboards or you take some of that, and if there's a red flag, then diving more into that specific area of data. Are they then taking that and saying, okay, this one doesn't look right. Why is that? Are they then, is that what starts a conversation?
I would say it depends. There's some retailers that want to do that. And then there's some that are like, well, I don't buy it. I don't know why.
Right.
And then there's others that say, actually, I do buy it and I trust you. Right? So I think taking a workflow and making it work for each of those flavors of retailers and size is a really big component, right? We've got independent operators that are Torqata customers and partners, and then we've got large national chains with 1,000 locations that are Torqata customers. And so then the needs for each of those entities are different, but usually I'd say the workflow is, here's where the market's going, here's where you're going, here's how you stack up, here's why I think you're stacking up well or not well, here's an opportunity to dig a little deeper, this is the action or the set of actions we recommend you take. And then depending on who the retailer is and how much time they have and how, say, tech forward they are, each step of the process, gets a little more or a little less attention. Over time, I hope that the trust in, our recommendations, our algorithms, as well as the breadth of data that we have increases, and we become the easy button, right? Like, I think a retailer should focus on what they're best at, which is taking care of the customers and providing a high-quality repair experience. I'm never going to be able to replace that. What I can replace is the mind space and the time spent on figuring out, do I stock this tire or this tire? And winter is coming, I probably need to change my assortment. Well, yeah, you probably should, but when is winter coming? When do I need to change it, right? We can take that. We can automate that and become a little bit of the easy button. You would be shocked, Jay, how many retailers are ordering the same product day in and day out. They don't need to do that. If they want to keep a certain quantity on hand, let's have us make sure that they always have it on hand.
How much do outside elements or things that maybe, when I look at analytics, the input that you would put in, and something like a COVID where you never could predict COVID, how much does something like that impact? You talk about forward-thinking data, and how much does that variable that nobody could ever dream of factor into how good the analytics are?
Well, we have yet to predict big macroeconomic events, and once we do, well, I love the aftermarket. I'm going to go into trading because we can make a lot of money with that. So that'll be difficult.
Yeah. You'll own an island somewhere. You won't have to worry about it.
Bahamas, that'll be nice. But let's say two things on it, right? You got to understand that there was an externality, and then you can take that bias out of the model. What I would say is even more important, though, is proper experiments and proper measurements. And so historically, we used to see that on the ATD side. Let's imagine you've got 4 different sales regions, and for one of the sales regions, you put in a new incentive model for the salespeople, right? Or any other stimulus. You add a bunch of salespeople or something like that. And you're like, well, performance of region A and performance of region B, we'll compare that after 3 months or 6 months, and we'll see whether region A did better than region B. There's a lot of other stuff that could have happened in region A or region B, right? It might have snowed in one region, might have not snowed in the other. Macroeconomic conditions like disposable income might have been lower or higher in one of those regions. Maybe there was labor strike or shortage, minimum wage was announced. I mean, you name it, right? So very often we're comparing apples and pears instead of apples and apples. So one thing that I'm really proud of that we do whenever we engage with a customer and try to show them, hey, your action actually had a positive effect. is to do proper A/B experiments. And so we've got a methodology where we identify stores like me that we compare you against. So we don't just compare you against stores around you, we compare you against stores around you that have similar characteristics as you do, and we take seasonality and debias it. So it's relatively sophisticated, but in the end, you end up with basically stores that behave very similarly before a certain stimulus happens, which could be a new product screen, a price action, and then you measure the deviation after that stimulus has happened. But the most important thing is to find stores that behave similar beforehand. Usually, for the kind of untrained operator, you'd go with like the 5 stores around you, or the 5 stores in your region, or a region that maybe looks similar, but in a lot of cases that's not really the case. We do that at a by store basis. So we always try to because ultimately, this is really important from a product development standpoint. I don't want to make a recommendation to a customer that doesn't actually drive value. And so I'm not okay with not being able to truly measure whether we've driven value or not. And to do that, I need to isolate cause and effect so I can then come up with a better solution once I kind of know the impact it's driven.
See, I think there's a lot of value in what you just said in terms of just not just comparing yourself to your competitor down the road, because there's a chance that your competitor down the road doesn't know what the hell he's talking about, right? Or he or she is talking about. And so, rather than just, going directly up against that person, actually, having some tangible data to go off of so that you're making reasonable suggestions. And the other thing I would add there is, I think in an event like a COVID or some other supply chain issue or whatever, I think it probably helps you from the data standpoint. It's almost a little bit more reassuring, or maybe it's even a little bit of insurance to where you're not sitting with a whole bunch of inventory that is taking up cash and not moving because you made a terrible decision to bulk purchase something that you shouldn't have in the first place, that's taking up space, that's something else that could move fast. I think you're safer. I mean, to me, that's the safer play in general.
I agree. The interesting piece in all of this is, though, you got to have the data to analyze and build a model from that, right? And when I came into the industry, it was always described as a bit of a data desert. I was like, really? That's weird. I mean, any entity creates data. I think that's wrong, actually. I don't think it's a data desert. The problem was that, there was I guess, trying to stick with a desert analogy, there's a bunch of little seas and little ponds and whatnot. It's just really difficult to get to these ponds. There's dunes, and your dune buggy wasn't able to get to the pond. That's, I think, the secret sauce that Torqata has developed over the past year and a half. And for that, we're talking about the fragmentation again. Very different entities, and many of them, right? That all have different ways, different software systems, and so on, to operate their businesses. And so you might sell a Tire A with retailer with Tom's Tire Store, and Tire A with John's Tire Store. And Tom and John describe that tire in very different ways, and they have different point of sale systems. And so in the end, it's in distributors and manufacturers' interest to then look at Tom and John's sales and make an assessment based on how much they sold. But in order to do that, you have to kind of come up with a common denominator, like a standardized way of expressing what Tom and John have sold. And so all of our analytics, all our insights are based on retailer sell-out inventory and pricing data, because it's the closest, signal we can get from the market. And to do that, we've built integrations with, 25 point of sale dealer management systems and a very robust, I would say, data aggregation and cleansing methodology that allows us to today ingest data from about 15,000 independent and repair shops, and a couple of larger chains, some national chains as well, on a daily basis. So every day I know what all of these 15,000 entities have sold, stocked, and priced. And I don't only have the raw data, I can bring it in that common denominator, roll it up, aggregate it, and be the Nielsen that tells Coke how much Pepsi has sold, and vice versa. And that's intelligence that really hasn't existed in the aftermarket. And And now it does. We think we track about 10% of all tires sold in the U.S. every day.
Wow.
So that intelligence then we bubble up and make it available as data as a service, software as a service products to the various constituents in the supply chain.
Very cool.
One of the things we do at WrenchWay is help technicians find great places to work. If you think your shop is a top shop, we want to hear from you. WrenchWay Top Shop pages are like resumes for shops. They share all the details technicians want to know about before they apply, such as compensation ranges for all levels, photos and videos of the service area, videos of technicians and managers, and frequently asked questions on work environment, career development, and hiring process. Attract more technicians to your shop by becoming a WrenchWay Top Shop. Visit wrenchway.com to contact us and learn more. Link is in the show notes.
Now, when you're looking at shops and you're trying to compare one shop to another in terms of, the commonality and being able to get a baseline from one for the other to use, is it revenue based, or is it give me an idea of how would you consider one shop being similar to another?
Oh yeah. So I think
loaded question.
It's a great question, technical question. I wish Andrew, our head of data science, was here. But let me give you the somewhat educated answer. I think we look at about 25 different characteristics that a store has, right? Overall sellout volume. I would say product mix. You selling, because you can't just look at volume. You might sell 100 tires, but there could be 100 Pirellis or 100, Tier 4 tires. So that's pretty different. And then I think seasonality and like weather patterns to a certain extent, as well as I would say the kind of operation strategy. Are you selling out of inventory? Are you selling more ad hoc? And so you take all of these kind of 20, 25 components and you basically try to identify stores that look similar around you. And that doesn't necessarily need to be stores that are in close proximity to you, right? They could be in other parts of the country, but just exhibit very kind of similar behaviors.
That is fascinating. The fact that you've got it down to that level to where you're able to compare apples to apples and really have the ability to build best practices off of that then too, because then when you're getting that back, hey, we can improve this in our business. And that's, once you improve that one thing, then you can move on to the next thing. And I think it just, to me, the business case for a shop to use something like this is such a no-brainer, because you can make your business better every single day.
Oh, I agree, and I'm trying to convince as many people as possible. And I think the sky is the limit to a certain extent. I mean, there's so many decisions that are being made in absence of data. And I mean, you say you're more involved in the kind of sales and marketing side, right? There are hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars of marketing spend that's just pushed into the market. No one really has got any idea as to whether that stuff works or it doesn't work, right? How often is, a marketing lift actually just a good weather pattern or a couple of new associates that were being hired or whatever it is, a stimulus check that was given out, right? And so you might very well make decisions in absence of data and just on gut feel than on wrong data. In a lot of cases, poor data or not the right comparisons almost give legitimacy to decisions when there's no legitimacy to be had, right? And so what we do, for example, in connecting the dots between a manufacturer and a retailer, right? So we got Michelin, whatever, running a Super Bowl campaign, having a buy 4 tires and get a Yeti cooler. That's sort of thing. But Michelin, has a hard time figuring out whether these initiatives actually worked or didn't work. They might see it, but they're not going to see it immediately, right? Because what Michelin sees is the sellout from Michelin to the distributor or maybe to their larger consumers. But they don't know whether that large consumer actually sold the tires to the end consumer. If they do the end consumer campaign, they got no idea whether it actually worked or not. And maybe they, because the retailer is going to deplete its own Michelin inventory, inventory. And maybe then a couple of weeks or months later, they buy some more Michelin product. And so Michelin might benefit from the consumer campaign that was run 2 or 3 months ago, once the inventory of the retailer and then the distributor is depleted, and then Michelin gets the demand signal, right? Today, I go to Michelin, we actually do that, right, with a bunch of my manufacturers. We say, hey, what sort of big media campaigns did you run? Where did you run them? Which products were you advertising? And then we go to the retailers and we say, okay, well, do we see an abnormal increase in that specific region, again, against stores like me, for that specific product that was advertised? How big was that lift? And we can go back to Michelin and say, hey, Michelin, this consumer campaign, that worked really well. But we don't really say it worked really well. We then say, it actually worked really well with owners of Toyota Corollas that were registered from like 2012 to 2014. Because every transaction that we see from our retailers is connected to a VIN and a year, make, and model. And through that, you can actually pick up which customers and which vehicles and which owners of vehicles were more drawn towards a certain promotion versus others. And again, Michelin loves that because the next time they run a promotion, next time they do a couple of Facebook campaigns, they can take that intelligence and target it more, ultimately driving up the ROI of their solution, deploying their marketing dollars, not with a shotgun, but with like a, I don't know, what is a more precise, like, rifle?
Like some kind of laser focus,
like exactly, yes.
Where do you see the future of this going? I mean, it feels like with the access to the data and the ability to really, you're adding so much here. Where do you see the future of this?
Well, I'm going to be done when we're giving $1.5 to $2 billion annually back to our customers. I mean, that's it. Actually, that was half of it. Because that number is going to increase, because it's only tires in North America right now. Once you think about other product categories, the inefficiencies are probably similar to the tune of 5 to 6 billion. And once you take a global lens, because most of the manufacturers are global entities, right? You're talking to like a value creation opportunity somewhere to the tune of 10 to 20 billion dollars annually. So that's the target, right? If I look ahead over the next 5 years, most immediately, we're still playing predominantly in the tire space. I want to drive up our retail penetration to something along the tune of like 20 to 30% of the market, right? That means I can bring more value to more retail customers. I also can aggregate more data. Ultimately, it's like a nice flywheel because our solutions get better the more data we have. That's over the next year or two. We got a lot of work to do because while everything that I just said sounds really good, I mean, devil's in the detail, and our business is really hard, and a lot of these operators are really smart, and they're looking for software companies that understand their business soup to nuts. And we're good on the technology side. I think we can get better at making sure that our recommendations, our insights really like hit the nail on what the retailers are needing right now. But that's in the tire space. And then I would say, next year, 2024, I could see us move into other product categories, right? Most of the retailers that sell tires sell a bunch of other services as well, and tools as well. So I think moving to other product categories, which is going to expand the manufacturers and distributors that we can do business with, because now we're moving from American Tires and Michelin to Napa and O'Reilly's and a manufacturer of like bucket blades. And then fourth step, after we've got tires, other products and services in North America, is to bring this to other parts of the world. And that's the number one question I get from the large tire manufacturers. Are like, Tim, what you're talking about is great, and the solution you have in the U.S. makes a lot of sense, and we stand behind you. But what about Europe, and what about South America? And I tell them in due time. But what we'd have to figure out for that is the access to retail seller. We'll have to build the POS and DMS integrations and start to assemble the data set. So for now, I'll grow the data set, make it be worth not just on the tire space, and then we'll look across the pond.
Well, this is going to be fun to follow along. I've learned so much today, and I appreciate you breaking it down to the point to where somebody like me can understand it, because it is. I know how much how advanced what you're doing is, and how incredible what you're doing is. I think there's a huge benefit in our industry for it. I think, as you mentioned multiple times, there's a load of inefficiencies in our industry, and I think everything that you're doing is helping drive that to be better. So I appreciate that. I do have a couple questions for you, non-Torqata related, but what do you do for fun now that you're in the U.S.? Like, what is it that you have hobbies, or is it always work?
No hobbies at all. I like work 24/7. No, absolutely not. I love being active and just like exercising. I got into hiking because that was like the thing to do during COVID. Like it was like making sourdough bread. Like I do that, and going hiking. So we love to get out, and I live out in California, so it's perfect. Outside of that, I'm a big sports guy. I love basketball. I love soccer. I'm excited for the World Cup, which is starting in a week.
Yeah.
Even though it's in Qatar, so I still have to wrap my head around the fact that they built like 15 big stadiums in the middle of the desert. But sure, I'll enjoy the soccer.
Who's your basketball team?
My basketball team. So we got to extend this now. I watch all basketball. I watch German basketball. Frankfurt Skyliners. I might be the only person in the U.S. that follows the Frankfurt Skyliners religiously. And then love college ball. March Madison is my favorite time of the year. And NBA-wise, I do follow all the German players and the teams that these players play for. So, and I don't know whether you're basketball or not, but Isaiah Hartenstein for the Knicks, big one. Love him. Dennis Schroeder, who plays for the Lakers. So I do live in LA, so I try to get to see the Lakers once in a while, even though it's a broken team. Maxi Kleber with the Dallas Mavericks, and I'm missing someone. The Wagner brothers in Orlando.
Oh yeah, Michigan alums, I think.
Oh,
yes.
Both of them. Yes. And that's I can tell you that I love that as part of my job, because the aftermarket is everywhere. You kind of get to go everywhere. I've tried to catch a game wherever I go, and honestly, that's probably been like one of the most fun parts of my job. Been able to go to a bunch of places that I probably wouldn't have gone to as a tourist. So I really to know the United States.
Well, if you make it up to Milwaukee sometime, let me know. We'll hit up a Bucks game.
Would love to see the Greek Freak in action. He's pretty special. But yeah, we should make it happen.
Yeah. We're I'm taking my nephew to a Bucks game against the Mavericks. He wants to see Luka play, so we're going to go check that out in a couple weeks. Actually, next Saturday. It's Saturday or Sunday or something. So it's a blast to watch. But if you make it up to Milwaukee, we'll definitely get together and hit up a Bucks game.
Tires being sold in Milwaukee and wherever tires.
A lot of them right now. It just snowed. My dad's an independent shop up here, right? And it just snowed, and every single year, this time of year, he gets so stressed out because everybody calls. They wait until it snows and then call, and so he always gets. I always every single year have to hear the same complaint. People just wait until it snows for tires, and I'm like, yeah, they did last year too.
Well, I've it's either no snow, too much snow, or I guess not the right amount of snow or something, right? Like weather prediction would be a good one too. Once we crack that. But there's a bunch of interesting stuff. I got to talk to your dad at some point.
Yes, absolutely. We'll you'd get a kick out of him. But no, in all seriousness, I love what you're doing. I appreciate you taking time to do the podcast today, and we'll do another one down the road to just kind of track your progress and see how everything goes, because it is a fascinating company, and I really, really enjoyed talking to you here today.
Thanks for having me, Jay. Part of my job is not just to build technology, but to educate folks around it in like a non-threatening way and non-like, oh my gosh, I need a PhD to understand type of way. So always a pleasure. And if any other listeners are interested in learning more, Torqata.com is your place to go. And if we don't have what you're looking for, we'd love to build it. So hope to be in touch with many of you and be able to share kind of the next chapter of our journey next year, because we're moving fast.
Well, perfect. We'll put the link in the show notes, and anybody that wants to go check them out, I would encourage you to do that. Tim, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Jay.
That wraps up this week's episode of Beyond the Wrench. Be sure to tune in next week for another brand new episode. As a reminder, don't forget to rate and follow Beyond the Wrench on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. This helps us get Beyond the Wrench in front of other fantastic shop owners, managers, technicians, and dealers just like you, so we can continue to help improve, promote, and grow this amazing industry. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll be back next week.